From the creators of TC 533 weekly discussion posts and the executive producers of responses to those posts comes a captivating new TV show, Taste Test. Before we tell you what Taste Test is about, let's talk about who it's for. Our intended audience are millennials and Gen Zers who may or may not have any kind of familiarity with Christianity. Millennials' formative years were in the context of a post 9/11 world when paranoia and distrust of the other became the norm. Millennials grew up alongside much of the technology that permeates our modern world, watching the emergence and popularization of personal computers, cell phones, YouTube, social media, and the like. These were developments that were touted as that which would connect us all, but which so many of us have watched divide, isolate, and alienate us from each other. Additionally, millennials graduated from college and entered the workforce either during or on the heels of the 2008 recession, struggling to rectify the dissonance between the American dream they had been raised to believe to be true and the bleak reality of the world they entered into as young adults. Thus, millennials seemingly have a foot in both worlds. That is, the innocent of pre 9/11 and the suspicion that came with having witnessed the Twin Towers fall, the promise of tomorrow and the disappointment of today, the connective possibilities of technology, as well as its capacity for isolation. These are just some of the worlds that millennials have had to navigate. And this dizzying dichotomy between the ideal and the real has contributed to a sense of jaded disillusionment amongst many millennials. Gen Zers have had a different experience with the conditions of the world that have come to disappoint millennials. Entering into a context in which there is no promise of an idyllic American dream, Gen Zers have accepted the sad reality of the world that they have inherited. Yet they have not resigned themselves to this, and their lack of disillusionment has seemingly contributed to their activism, desire for change, and push for progress. Together, millennials and Gen Zers can help one another navigate the stark realities of the modern world. As adults who have already emerged, millennials can be a helpful and supportive influence for the emerging adult Gen Zers. The enthusiasm and fresh drive for change that characterizes many Gen Zers' attitudes can galvanize and encourage millennials who may have become rather weary of being in a world so different from what they were promised. The social media literacy and creativity that many Gen Zers have may provide a helpful shift in millennials' social media usage, such that community can be cultivated digitally when it is not possible to participate in it physically. So, in conclusion, our show, Taste Test, is intended for millennials and Gen Zers who are wrestling with questions of identity, community, and relationality. Members of both generations have an abundance of knowledge, experiences, and worldviews to share with one another as they navigate life. It is through encountering different perspectives by which we grow. New viewpoints yield new thoughts and possibly even new interpretations and beliefs. Jesus embodied this during his time on earth, as he made it a point of his ministry to come alongside people on many different walks of life. When we do life alongside those with a different viewpoint, we are better able to revise and revisit what we believe, resulting in our having a more nuanced and robust understanding of the gospel. So, let's delve deeper and further analyze our target audience of millennials and Gen Zers. The target audience is going to be adults between the ages of 18 and 38. This is the age range spanning these two generations. And so people in the this generation grew up between the 90s and the 2000s and represent a group that saw the beginning of the digital and computer age. And we chose this span of audience because we felt that this audience connected best to the story and background of the show. Millennials, in particular, are beginning or have begun their journeys into their careers and establishing families and lives. The search for identity, passion, purpose, and value are things that this group seems to strive for, which also translates into the shows that they may watch. They have also lived through different world crises, such as the dot-com bubble bursting, 9/11, the housing market crash, and various race and equality movements. This has led to some questioning related to certain established institutions, which plays into the journey of identity. Those from the Gen Z generation grew up when the digital age was becoming firmly established and the rise of social media came into fruition. They are well connected digitally and have started or have just finished college. A show that shares relatable societal and cultural norms will help connect with this generation. Because they have grown up with information at their fingertips, they easily question information around them. So, now that you have a sense of who will be watching, let's talk about what they'll be watching. Taste Test features Andre, a college age Puerto Rican adopted to a family of white, conservative, evangelical former missionaries who is raised in the South. He decides to leave a Christian university and pursue culinary school in LA against his parents' wishes. Culinary school provides Andre with multiple opportunities not only to explore his identity, but to connect with people from other cultures, while at the same time exploring culturally diverse food. Although displaced in his new home in LA, Andre soon connects and grows with his fellow classmates. We also explore the worlds of said fellow classmates, and as well as the growth of Andre's parents throughout this show. Taste Test then explores the concept of found family, whether you found it or it found you. In order to better convey the feel of Taste Test, here are some representative examples of existing TV programming and movies that share the same sensibilities as our show and target audience. Based on our target audience, our show can be described as Community meets Chef meets 100-Foot Journey. Community is a show that aired in 2009 and follows an unconventional group of people who form a study group to finish community college. This show was popular for its humorous and unconventional take on college. Chef is a movie that chronicles an established chef who goes on a soul searching journey to find his love of food and life again by starting a food truck business. The 100-Foot Journey follows the story of an immigrant who has extraordinary culinary skills who tries to find his way in a new country after being displaced from his home. These shows and movies relate to the tone of what we are trying to convey in Taste Test, while also portraying the ways that we can connect to our audience, such as through relatable journeys and humor. Additionally, Taste Test is also similar to shows like ER or Grey's Anatomy in terms of social dynamics, the diversity of characters, and young adults trying to find identity. Let's now explore our cast of characters. So, first, we're going to talk about Andre, our lead. This slide shows just some visuals and media sources of inspiration that we drew on when creating Andre. Andre has seen his world turn completely around. Adopted by conservative parents who had plans for his life, he leaves their school of choice to pursue a culinary career. Not so much of a professional achievement, but a reflection of Andre being a young 20 something following a passion in order to discover his own identity and place in the world, as well as his identity and place within his own faith journey. Food represents that world, its differing flavors, origins, influences, and literally tastes. He is simultaneously confident and petrified, convicted yet questioning. What will he draw and learn from his parents now that he has spread his wings? What will he learn from his peers? A rich diversity of cultures, ethnicities, socioeconomic heritage, and generational variety. So let's talk about some of the other characters in the show. And we'll start out talking by the quote unquote home characters of Andre's adoptive parents, Jamie Lee and Bobbert Ray. Jamie Lee is a devout Southern Baptist woman who is strong in her faith. She was a missionary in Puerto Rico for 6 years with her husband and two biological children. Although she is fun and likable, she is a quote unquote smother devoted to the righteous path. Her inspiration and overall vibe, for lack of a better term, is Beth Moore charisma meets Michelle Duggar momness meets Beverly Goldberg smother. Andre's adoptive father, Bobbert Ray, is a Southern Baptist pastor and missionary. The overall sort of, again, quote unquote, vibes that he gives off is benevolent cult leader who tells dad jokes. His inspiration source is Jim Bob Duggar meets David Koresh meets Phil Dunphy. Outside of our home characters of Andre, Jamie Lee, and Bobbert Ray are Andre's classmates at culinary school. So first, we have Andre's chef and instructor. Former chef to the stars, Enrique Holmes is a third-generation Brazilian American who found his love of cooking as a boy, side by side with his grandmother, who taught him authentic Brazilian dishes. Enrique is a divorced, bitter man in his early 50s and is in a stage of life where he feels like teaching is a bit of a step down. No longer being called on by Hollywood's biggest stars, he questions his significance and social location as he endeavors to teach this highly diverse group of culinary students. The cultural tensions and crossroads introduced by these students will bring questions to Enrique's mind that he has never asked, and through that dialogue and engagement, he discovers a love of passing on his passion for cooking that is even greater than being the star celebrity chef. So, another one of the characters that features primarily in Taste Test is one of Andre's classmates, Molly, who is a 46-year-old Caucasian widower who's raised in the South. So, Molly comes to the school seeking a second act in her life. And so, in this way, she can relate to Enrique. She had raised two kids and sent them from the nest, only to see her husband of 15 years tragically pass away. As a Caucasian woman raised in the rural southeastern US, someone who had never traveled outside of her country, her lack of exposure to alternative cultures becomes a central backdrop to this new environment where she is now the minority. We also have Jerome, a mid 20s gay African American man who grew up in the inner city. Jerome arrives at the culinary school with trepidation. He has recently come out within a context of familial rejection and is now trying to find a tribe to belong to as much as he is trying to obtain skills as a chef. Having been involved in gang life as a teen and witnessing inner city Chicago violence, he carries into this new tribe much suspicion and distrust of others. It is a tension that is seen openly, and it will take the other students being proactive to break through those walls. In addition to these characters, we have characters outside of Andre's specific class and taste test who also attend the school. We have Fadila, who is a mid 20s young woman of Iraqi descent. She remembers vividly having to escape her homeland, facing threats from ISIS, and she and her family continue to struggle with anger at the losses that they experienced. Her name means generous, but her character, while desiring to learn all she can through the school, carries a bitterness that will initially push people away. But over time and in conversation over shared ethnic dishes, the walls begin to break down. We also have Eric, a 32-year-old Texan who learns that his roots are Guatemalan. Early in the show, he discovers for the first time that his heritage is Guatemalan, after learning that he was smuggled into the country and then given up by relatives who felt they couldn't raise him. He has done management in fast food, but has a love and desire to go further. But this curveball of his Guatemalan roots brings about tremendous questions of placement and struggles with the deception all of these years that he has lived so far. He now realizes that his citizenship is in question and worries about what might transpire. This tension creates walls initially among his peers. Another student in this cast is Paula, a single 37-year-old British national of African descent. Paula walks into the school after learning about this legendary chef, Enrique. She will encounter the racial tensions of America in ways she never saw back home, and while trying to connect with Jerome, finds that they have more differences than they have in common. Her character emphasizes the struggle for connection between ethnicities and cultures far beyond simple skin tone. And finally, we have Ezekiel, a Jewish man in his late 60s who never married. Ezekiel is the wild card, a Jewish man never married and grabbing at straws for a new start. While his name means God's strength, this is a man barely hanging on. Believing that there was no way to connect with this group, Ezekiel will eventually step into several roles with his fellow culinary students, including mentor, problem solver, peacemaker, wisdom source, and even fatherly figure. Now we're going to move on to talk about how we envision disseminating taste tests. Our goal is to be as spreadable as possible, using a mixture of traditional Hollywood and newer influencer models. These approaches, while effective on their own, allow us to mix them together and spread them like butter. Traditional trailers and show clips provide our staple spreadable content on network and show accounts, while the show's fictional cooking school account provides the memeable content. This takes the school's internet presence from being more than just an Easter egg website to a place for community creation and interaction through school information that affects the show's story, recipes, and tutorials, as well as witty remarks and interactions with followers. Think Wendy's Twitter account meets Gordon Ramsay. And having our cast be known through interactions with such sources as BuzzFeed, Binging with Babish, and Good Mythical Mornings, Mythical Kitchen, and related podcasts will allow our audience to be introduced to the cast in a relatable, light-hearted manner. And from there, they can experience the satisfaction of growing alongside our cast and characters. So, we imagine that there could be some difficulties that accompany our dissemination strategy. A relatively unknown cast and a niche show can be seen as a downside, but a niche show is one step away from a cult following. What we need is to be careful with the way our social media interaction is handled to maintain the message and community we are hoping to build with this show. That way, the show's message is echoed by its fans and word will spread. Finally, let's talk about the theological underpinnings and implications of taste tests. So, how are we trying to convey the gospel? We wanted to explore the concept of found family, that is, unity among the diversity that is within the body of Christ, especially in the face of disillusionment. Our chosen audience of millennials and Gen Z face this challenge, which we thought could be addressed with the gospel message. In choosing the story and identifying with our audience, many in the group identified with Andre's fish out of water situation, in which he is searching for identity and differentiating his own beliefs. Along with the diverse group of friends he makes, we liked the idea of many directions that these characters and situations could explore. Why this type of media? First of all, we wanted to connect with our audience who are millennials and Gen Zers, who are struggling with disillusionment and finding their identity. So, these sorts of topics, such as disillusionment, searching for identity, can be difficult. So, comedy can help add levity. And further, these awkward, growing parts of life are rife for comedic content. And finally, We like the format of a sitcom because you are able to explore and get to know characters more fully than in sketch or other types of comedy. And this also gives us an ability to explore these complex and potentially heavy topics that we've talked about previously in this presentation with some levity. The idea that there is medicine in the candy. How we imagine communicating the gospel to our audience. So, as we've established, millennials and Gen Zers face disillusionment with society. And importantly, this disillusionment is towards institutions, including religion. Since these institutions are often a part of one's cultural identity, disillusionment can cause doubt and seeking of identity, as well as their tribe or community, that is, their found family. The gospel can be communicated to this group because, like millennials and Gen Z, Jesus faced disillusionment. He faced this with the Jewish people and people being disillusioned with who they thought he would be. But Jesus showed us new ways of living by interacting with and inviting those different from him and the Jewish people into a new community. Our audience can hear the gospel realizing disillusionment is an invitation to new perspectives and ways of living, and that the best way to go about finding those new perspectives and whole ways of living is interaction and community with those who are different from us. Only then will we start to live a life of fuller shalom.